Thanks for checking out this video. Today we are going to be talking about the Dehancer plugin for Photoshop and Lightroom Classic. In the example here that I'm going to go through, we're going to be looking at Photoshop. I don't use Lightroom Classic, and as you guys know from my previous Dehancer videos, Dehancer is a terrific plugin that allows us to emulate the look of film. And with this new release of this plugin that allows us to work with stills in Photoshop natively or Lightroom Classic, they take it up a notch. You see, being able to emulate film is more than just about what the film itself is able to do. It's also interpreted by how it is that you print that film. So not only do you consider the stock film that you want to capture in, but then that translation of what film is all about becomes fully expressed when you print onto a specific stock of whether it be paper or digital. And in this case, they've been able to emulate that. And this is what we're going to be covering in today's example. So I have a picture here of Jacob, he's a good family friend, who happened to be a model for Hufta. Hufta is Bert's apparel brand. And this was shot on the Fujifilm GFX 100S. So if I go to 100% here, you'll see this is a very large file. No, I don't want to. There we go. Very large file. But this is the file that we're going to be using to work with. So let me just bring it back down to something so we can see the entire image here. All right, so to launch Dehancer after you've installed it, which by the way, they make two different versions of the plugin, one for regular Macs and then the other one for M1 Macs. So, you know, depending on which Mac you use, be sure to install the correct version, and it's very easy to sort that out because they include instructions. So I've already installed it on my Mac Pro, which is the computer that we're using for this example. So now all I have to do is go to Filter, and then I'm going to select Dehancer Film. And this will bring me to the interface that then allows me, and as you can see, I've already expanded it into my full screen here. You can choose to do a preview version. I'm choosing not to do any preview versions because I want to see as much of the quality as possible. And on this side, on the left side, we have, let me just turn this off. Actually, I'm going to move just so I have full control over my files here, because I'm seeing this little preview window, which you may not be seeing because I'm recording the screen as well as recording my talking head. But here you can sort out by what type of film you want to be using. I'm selecting all so that we can see all of the different options. This photograph was already processed, so I shot it in RAW. I've already processed to what I want my white balance to be, as well as what I want my exposure to be, and so on. So really what this allows me now to do is basically to select a film stock and in one click make the adjustment to emulate that film stock. So I'll show you here. If I use this ADOX, that gives me an instant change. Again, just clicking on this by itself, it's automatically adjusting and emulating the look of traditional film. So I'm just going to go through these kind of quick here, just so you can see. Some of these are subtle, some of them are not so subtle. Like this one I really, really like. So this is Agfa Color XRS 200, 1991 version, right? So I really like this look. This gives it a much cleaner, more commercial look, I would say. So we're going to come back to this one here after I go through the rest. But just so you can see, one click makes an instant change. And of course, this allows you to stylize your images in a way that is not a like traditional IG filter or any other filter from social media platforms, to make the images look a lot more your own and unique. And of course, that's not where it stops. But let's just quickly go through some more here. They have some excellent black and white film stock emulations, as well as, you know, as you can see here, a whole lot of other types of film emulations. This one's also really, really nice. CineStill 800T. I also really like this one. Let's see, just keep going through. And all of these adjustments are happening in one click. So they're effectively acting as a filter, except it's not a filter. It's a film emulation by Dehancer. It's a significant difference between the two. And like I said, they have a lot of options, So once you find the one that you like, so I'm going to go back to that one, CineStill 800T. I really like this look. It's clean, it's modern. It doesn't look like it was shot on a digital camera, which, you know, it is medium format digital camera that I used, but this already looks significantly better, in my opinion, than what I had originally corrected from my raw image. And what I can do now is I can further process this image by using the panel on the right side. So here I can see that I have my source. I can make adjustments to my color temperature, so I can make it cooler if I want, or I can warm it up. So based on the type of shot that you might want or need, I like a little bit warmer feeling. This was shot during golden hour, so warmer would be correct. You can adjust the tint compensation, so you can push in more green or magenta, whatever it is that you want. I'm going to leave this at 0. And of course, you can make some really fine adjustments. You can defringe, which the default is 50%, but check this out. I'll just go to extreme so you can see what's happening here. It's very subtle, but basically it just allows for a more natural fall off in between the different dynamic range gradients. It's probably the best explanation that I can give. You can set your black point. I think that this is really important when you're processing film, you know, like back in the day when people would process film. That was before my time. But understanding, and by the way, this is the way that color grading also works. If you set your black point and you set your white point to what it is that you want, then you manipulate the rest of the color information into that in-between stage that then gives you all the different stops that you might need to tell your story or tell your image. That also, by the way, is almost exactly how you would expose a red camera, right? So as long as you're not clipping any whites or you're not clipping any dark information, you will never lose all the information that the sensor is capturing. So this is what setting your black point allows you to do. You can decide what you want your black point to be, just like you can decide what your white point to be, and then Dehancer helps you map out all the tonal range in between that, in the luminance range, I should say, in between the white and black point. And yeah, so I just changed it from normal to Luma, but it's effectively the same thing. It's the luminance information in between white and black. And then the print option, which is what we talked about earlier, where I said, now we can actually see the full version of a film emulation based on what we're going to print on. So the default is this Kodak Endura glossy paper. But if we wanted to, we can choose this Kodak 2383 print or Cineon film, right? And you can tell because it just got really, really flat. Or we can go linear. So you're able to make a determination as to how you want to process that film emulation based on real world, how that film emulation would look should you have printed on any one of these different print options. You can adjust things like your target white, your exposure, your tonal contrast, and so on. The saturation. If this is too saturated for you, you could bring it down. And you could set up an analog limiter. Now watch what happens here with the highlights when I do this. All of a sudden, I lost a little bit of contrast, but also my image instantly went from looking more clinical digital to looking more filmic. And that's one of those, the difference between maybe like a modern young filmmaker, cinematographer, image maker, and someone who still very much like me romanticizes the aesthetics of film. So I personally like to use the analog range limiter, even though it reduces my contrast ever so slightly. But if you don't like it, turn it off and you get a much more clinical look. And then of course, Dehancer has excellent film grain, and that is brought on over into the plugin for Photoshop and Lightroom Classic. So I'm going to go ahead and turn on the film grain, and you can see what that effect is going to be. And instantly we have a bit of film grain, which gives it more texture. You can see the texture, of course, a lot more in the bokeh or blurry areas of the image. If I go 1:1, here is where I would begin. I would have to do 1:1 to make some fine adjustments so that the image becomes what I want it to look like. And make no mistake, film grain is very different than noise. Okay, so with that, just know that the lowest you can go on the plugin for Photoshop is 1. That's not the case. You can make some finer adjustments on the resolved version for motion. But in this plugin, this is the lowest that we can go. And of course, you can go as high as you want. This would be heavily, heavily stylized. Not the look that I'm going for this type of image. But you can bring that down. And you can make adjustments into the shadows or into the midtones to change the grain structure and allow you to stylize in a way that you would want. Then also you could add or remove color from the film grain, again, to suit the image that you're trying to capture. This is much more pleasing. And of course, if this is going to be published to social media, then I might want to turn up the film grain a bit just to give it more of that aesthetic. But this is a very nice looking image. If I was going to print this image, then this is enough. Keep in mind that when you upload images to social media platforms, you're going to go through compression, and compression is going to ruin part of this film grain emulation. In fact, it's going to try to clean some of it up. And that, unfortunately, is something we can't control because we can't control what Facebook does, what Instagram does, what TikTok does, and everybody else. So just keep that in mind. I'm going to shut off film grain for just a second. And then we have some other traditional adjustments like the color head. We can add blue, remove blue, add magenta, push green, go over to cyan, We can gang the adjustments, right? So if I make an adjustment in one direction or another, it's literally making the adjustment to all three heads, color heads. And we can choose to preserve the exposure and the impact or not. And I think that that's also really great. And of course, we have two of my favorite film-related effects that are also available here. So halation, which, watch what happens to the logo here on his shirt when I turn that on. So that's probably a little too strong, right? But you can decide how much of it you want to apply and how much you don't want to apply. You could also set a limiter so that while it's there, and you can see that it is there, turn it on, turn it off, you can decide how much of it you want. And I think that that's a really powerful tool. And of course we have bloom, and bloom just allows us to bloom the highlights. And just like halations, we can make adjustments. We can decide how much to allow it to bloom or not to bloom to make the image exactly what it is that we are going for the shot that we took. And being able to stylize all of this in a way that allow us to make our images unique and our own gives you the ability to stand out when you are processing your images and sharing them with the world. That is the power of a plugin like Dehancer, and why it is that I'm a fan of Dehancer. I'll be sure to include links in the description right below the like button so that you guys can check out the plugin and, you know, maybe download a free trial and see if it's right for you and your type of work. And if it is, of course, then you might be able to get a discount. So vignette is the last tool. And again, just like everything else, we have the ability to adjust the vignette to fit whatever we are going for, as well as the size of the vignette and the feather and the aspect ratio. Once you're done, you basically just say, okay, I'm happy with this image. You click it and it instantly applies it to your image in Photoshop, ready for you to save the file, export it, or send it off to print. That was a quick look at the Dehancer plugin for Adobe Photoshop and Lightroom Classic. If you guys need more information, I'll be sure to include it in the notes section below. And if you have any other questions, be sure to leave a comment and I'll do my best to answer it. Thanks again, and I will catch up with you guys in the comments. Take care.